There's not going to be any unboxing or anything like that. You know how to take something out of a box. You don't need to see me doing it. What's up, guys? So this is a bit of a different video for me. I wanted to do a video about a Nest installation on a wire plan because I think it's probably the most tricky one. And me personally, I quite enjoy central heating wiring. I know a lot of people don't, even a lot of electricians don't enjoy doing it, but for some reason I find it fun. And I wanted to do this video to sort of break it down into the way it is in my head, because in my head it don't seem as complicated as maybe it looks on paper. Now, one of the reasons a lot of people don't like central heating wiring is because your wiring centre, on the diagram, it looks nice and tidy and there's numbers and all the cables are the right colours and everything. But in real life, your wiring centre is probably going to look something like this. This is a typical wiring centre you'll find on a central heating system. Notice all the different colours of wires, just into connector blocks, no real order about it. This is actually quite a tidy one. You'll get ones like this where they've put tape over it, they've tried to label them, they've used the numbered connector blocks, but they don't necessarily go in with the numbers that they're meant to. Earth wires will be used as switching lives, all kinds of things. This is probably one of the worst ones I ever went to. Imagine if this was your first time looking at a wiring centre, you took the cover off and saw all this. I wouldn't blame you if you got in your van and just drove away. But there's all kinds of stuff gone in. It's overcrowded, there's too many cables, too many wires, all different colours, all going all over the place, a lot of tension on the wires, just a really bad install. In fact, this one reminds me of Superman 3 when Superman gets attacked by that supercomputer. So there's no shame in not enjoying wiring or looking at a wiring centre or a junction box like that and thinking, where the hell do I start? So what I've tried to do in this video is, by the use of diagrams, but then also me doing what I've spoke about in the diagrams on a real job in someone's house. Hopefully if you watch the whole thing, a light bulb will click in your head, or something what was missing before where you didn't quite understand it, or you didn't even want to think that you could understand it, and the way I explain it, then it becomes easier in your head. That's the idea behind the video. But it's been the hardest video I've ever done because there's so much information and you can go so deep with it. But really, you don't need to. You only need to concern yourself with the things relevant to the Nest installation. Having said that, it's probably not the video for DIY homeowners. It's more aimed at gas engineers, heating engineers, apprentices, some people with a bit of background knowledge on wire plan heating system wiring. The first time I ever fitted a Nest on a wire plan, I was thinking about it before I got to the job. And in my head, I was thinking, where am I going to put the Nest hub? Am I going to put it where the programmer is, or am I going to put it where the wiring centre is? And I thought that might be a question that other people would think. So originally I was going to do two wiring diagrams, one with the Nest at the programmer location and one with the Nest at the wiring centre. But then I thought there's not many scenarios where someone is going to fit the Nest hub where the programmer was, and for a couple of reasons. Number one, if you're going to hardwire your Nest thermostat on the wall where your old thermostat was, those two cables that you're going to use don't go all the way to the programmer. They only go to the wiring centre. So if you wanted to do that, you'd have to drag a new cable from your thermostat location to your hub, or where your old programmer was. And also, it's really difficult to fit that Nest hub onto a standard backplate. The screws don't line up properly. So after I did both of those, I thought, no, I don't need that. It's too much information. The video's too long. So I've cut that out, because basically you're only going to fit your Nest hub where your programmer was if you're going to use your Nest on a stand. But even then, you can do it just as easy by fitting it at the wiring centre anyway. So this is just going to show you wiring with the Nest hub at the wiring centre. But give it a watch. You might enjoy it. You might learn something, hopefully. So here it is. Right, before we get started, I just wanted to show you this app. It's really good. It's called the Honeywell Home Wiring Guide. And you can have this on your phone, so you can use it when you're fault finding. But if you want to get more familiar with wiring guides, S plans, Y plans, this is great because it gives you all the diagrams you need. So they're all listed here. So we're going to look at a wire plan, and we're looking at a wired wire plan. It gives you all the component parts, but also it gives you this wiring diagram. Now these wiring diagrams are great for fault finding, but the only trouble is it looks nice on the screen there, but in real life it's not going to look anything like this. So you've not got the luxury of these numbered terminals. You've got to work out which wire does what and where it's going. For example, programmer probably in the kitchen, room thermostat probably in the hallway, boiler, kitchen, maybe even in the garage. These cables are going to run all through the fabric of the building and end up with the wiring centre in the airing cupboard, and you've got to work out what does what. And these cables, you see they're all black on this diagram, from the room thermostat, from the programmer. You've got no way of identifying them in the wiring centre because you don't know what colour they're going to be. The only thing we know for sure is the colour of the wires from the zone valve. So we use that to identify what everything else is. Orange, grey, white, green, yellow and blue. Where they connect onto this connector block in the middle, the wiring centre, we can work out what does what. Just to give you an example before I get into it, I've drawn my own diagram. Look at the grey wire from the 3-port valve. Goes in at number 7 there with the cylinder stat. Number 7 also goes down to the programmer. So if we find the wire that goes in with the grey and follow it to the cylinder stat, we know the other one that goes in with the grey goes down to our programmer. So follow that wire, whichever cable that wire's in, you will also find your hot water on from the programmer, and you'll also find your heating on from the programmer. So you've identified straight away that cable. If you follow the white from the mid-position valve, it connects in with one of the wires that goes to the room stat. So once you've found that wire, follow it back, and the cable that comes up with that wire in will also have a neutral to your room stat and the other switching wire for your room stat. So you've identified that cable. And that's basically the easiest way to do it. So now we'll look at the diagrams that I've made. So what I've done here is I've took this wiring diagram, put it onto my iPad so I can draw on real time as I'm talking where the wires go, why we're doing it. But it's still quite complicated. With regards to fitting the Nest thermostat, we don't really need to know about the pump, about the boiler. I'm going to remove a lot of it and also remove the numbers because we don't get the numbers in real life, so we don't need those as well. So I'll load the next drawing now. So now we've removed the boiler, the pump and all the numbers, and it looks a lot clearer. What we need to focus on, because our Nest thermostat and hub is going to be replacing the programmer, that's going to go, and the room stat, that's going to go. So what we need to do is find and remove these 3 wires and these 2 wires. So we'll start with an easy one. We're going to follow the grey wire from our 3-port valve, and that connects in with 2 other wires. One's going to come to our cylinder stat. Now you should easily be able to see that wire because the cylinder stat will be in the same cupboard or the same room location as your wiring centre. So follow that wire to the cylinder stat, and then the other wire that goes in with the grey, you're going to remove it. Put it into a connector block, Wago, just keep it to one side but remove it from this terminal here. So still looking at our cable that comes from the cylinder stat, we know that we've got this one here that goes in with the grey, that stays as it is. Your second wire that comes from the cylinder stat connects in with the orange, that stays where it is. So find the third wire that comes from your cylinder stat, and that connects in with our hot water on from the programmer. We don't need that anymore, so remove that, put it into a block, terminate it, Wago connector, whatever, just remove it. Now we're going to look for the cable that comes up from the room stat. The easiest way to identify that is to find the white wire from the 3-port valve, and that connects in with one other wire that goes down to our room stat. So once you've identified that wire, find the cable that joins in with. That should have 3 wires in it. A neutral and the other switch wire for the room stat. Once you've found that cable, you know that one connects in with the white, the other one's going to be blue for the neutral, So this one here connects in with one other wire, which is our central heating on from the programmer that we don't need anymore. So you're going to cut that, terminate it, and away go, whatever, move it out of the way. So now it should look like this. This neutral wire here that comes from our wiring centre down to the room stat, we don't need it anymore. So we're going to remove that at the room stat and at the wiring centre. So that is gone. Now I'm going to load up the picture with our Nest hub on. So this is our wiring diagram from the actual Nest instructions. You might think it looks complicated, but it's not. So we've got our cylinder stat here. Now if you look, there's only 3 wires come off the cylinder stat. We've already spoke about those. One of the wires from the cylinder stat connects in with the orange on the zone valve, so we automatically know what that one is, and that one stays the same. The second wire from our cylinder stat connects in with the grey on the 3-port valve. That stays the same. The only thing we have to do is take a wire from number 4 from our Nest hub and connect it in with the grey from the zone valve. This was the wire that went to our programmer. So we've got 3 wires that come out of our cylinder stat. One connects in with the orange, the second one connects in with the grey, so the third one we need to put in number 6 on our Nest hub. So just take a wire from number 6 and connect it in with the wire that comes from the cylinder stat. Central heating on comes from number 3, and that is connected to the white on the zone valve. Well, we've just removed the old wire that went down to the thermostat, so just connect that in with that. So number 3 to the white of the zone valve. And if you're using your Nest thermostat on the stand, that's it, you've done. The only other thing we need to do is if you want to use your Nest hardwired, so put it at the old thermostat location in the hallway, we're going to need to connect T1 and T2. These connect to the old room thermostat wires that we disconnected from the white. We'll look at that on the next diagram. Right, so now I'm going to try and talk through the whole job using this simplified diagram. So first of all, start by removing the cables and wires that we've already removed from our wiring centre. So this is the wires coming up from the programmer in the kitchen. And then the 2 wires that went down to our room thermostat, switching wires, they've been removed, as well as the neutral to that room thermostat. So that's the wires that we've removed. Now I'm just going to get rid of the program as well, because that's all disconnected and we don't need to concern ourselves anymore with that. So our job now is to connect our Nest hub to the wiring centre and to the room thermostat. So we'll start with our Nest hub needs permanent live and a neutral. Now the live also needs to link in with number 2 and number 5. The reason we have to put this link wire in is because in your old programmer that live link is in there automatically built in, but it's not in the Nest hub. So we've got to put that in. So now the first one we're going to connect is number 3 on the Nest hub, which is central heating on, and we need to connect that with the white wire of the zone valve. So we're going to take that from number 3 out of the Nest along and connecting on the wiring centre there with the white wire. So that's central heating on. Next one is number 4, that is hot water off, and that connects in with the grey to our zone valve on the wiring centre. Number 6 is hot water on, and that connects in to our common on the cylinder stat. Now if we look at the cylinder stat, if you follow the cable that comes from the cylinder stat, it's got 3 wires in it. One goes in with the orange, one goes in with the grey, so it's the 3rd wire from that cylinder stat that we connect to number 6. It will be in that wiring centre on its own now because we removed the wire that came from the programmer. Now if you're going to put your Nest on a stand and plug it into the wall and not hardwire it in the old Thermostat location, that's your wiring done. If you are going to use the Thermostat and hardwire it, what you need to do is find the cable that had the 2 switching wires and the neutral that went down to the Thermostat, and use the 2 switching wires to connect into T1 and T2. So we're going to come from the Thermostat and connect one into T1 and one into T2, and that's your wiring in the wiring centre done. Hopefully simplified and an easy enough to follow diagram. Hopefully you're still with me after all those diagrams and wiring talk. So now what I'm going to do is take what I've just spoke about in those diagrams and implement it in a real life job. So this is a job that a customer just rang me up and said, we want a Nest fit in, can you come round? It was a wire plan. The boiler was in the garage, the programmer was in the kitchen, thermostat in the hallway, and wiring centre in the area cupboard in the middle of the house. So it just was a kind of perfect job to show you. I filmed as much as I could. I don't want it to be a step-by-step guide. This is not for DIY people, like I said. But hopefully you get an idea of what I've just spoke about with the wiring diagrams to what I do in real life. Right, hopefully your brain's not fried from all those wiring diagrams and the talk about wiring it up. I'm just going to go through and do what I've just spoke about on this job. And it's a real job. It's not on a piece of ply in someone's workshop. We've got the programmer near the back door in the kitchen. The room thermostat is in the hallway. The boiler on this job is outside in the garage, so it's not even near the programmer in the kitchen. And the wiring centre is up in the airing cupboard in the middle of the house. So we've got 3 cables coming from different locations in the house, all buried in the walls. How do we tell what cable's what? We use the 3-port valve because that's what our job is to do, is to control that 3-port valve with our Nest hub. We're replacing the old thermostat and the old programmer and connecting our new Nest hub up to it. And we know for a fact the colour of those wires coming out of that 3-port valve, so we can use them to identify the wires we need to work with. So that's the natural place to fit the Nest hub. So the first thing I do after safe isolation, so I've made sure the power's off, is take the front cover off the programmer, the front cover off the wiring centre, and the front cover off the room thermostat, and then just get familiar with the wires that are there. We don't need to do anything near the boiler because we don't need to connect anything that's in our Nest hub as part of this job to the boiler. It's all done in the wiring centre. So what we do is, like I spoke to you in the previous video, using the colours that come from the black cable, which comes from the zone valve, because we know they're the only things that we know the colours of. Just see where they connect in, see how many wires we've got in the back of there, just get familiar with it. I won't blame you if you were scared of wiring centres because they can be so complicated, so messy. You just think, oh, what am I going to do here? I've got a clue what any of these cables are, where they come from. So you're just going to have to do your best. Always take a photo of it, because if you take something out or something just pops out because it's loose, you don't know where it came from, you might have to start all over again. So all I'm doing here is I'm following the cables, the wires from the black cable that comes from that zone valve, because I know what they are, working out which cable goes down to my Thermostat and which cable goes down to the programmer, and just putting them into blocks. Now obviously on this job I'm going to be hardwiring my Nest thermostat on the wall, so the switching wires that go down to my Thermostat I'm putting into blocks now because I'm going to reuse them. But the wires that come from the programmer in the kitchen, I'm gonna block them off as well. because on this job I've not got a permanent live in this wiring centre. So I need to connect 2 of those cables that came from my old programmer in the kitchen into the live and neutral that was in the old programmer to bring me a permanent live and neutral up here. So I'm going to use those as well. But anything I take out, I'm just putting into a connector box just in case I've got it wrong or just in case I need them. So far upstairs in the wiring centre, all I've done is removed my cable from my room thermostat and my cable from my programmer. So the cable that goes up to the room stat now, I'm linking in with the live and the neutral that went to the old programmer, so I can send a permanent live and permanent neutral up to my wiring centre. Everything else just gets terminated in Wago blocks and put in the back box, and then this can just be blanked over now. If you wanted to fit your Nest hub down here, you could only do that if you were using the Nest on a stand, because the 2 wires that go to our room thermostat don't come down to this programmer location. So you would have to drag a new cable. So back up in the wiring centre in the airing cupboard, now I'm just linking in those 2 wires that used to come from the programmer that I've now borrowed as a live and neutral. That's giving my Nest hub there on the wall the permanent live and neutral supply it needs. So that's the Nest hub wired up according to the diagram that we looked at. So we're done in the wiring centre in the airing cupboard now. All we've got left to do is sort out the room thermostat. We've disconnected the neutral. The earth was never connected on this, and because we're now using 12 volts and not 240 volts, that neutral and earth are just going to get terminated in Wago blocks. And we're using the red and yellow which connect upstairs into our hub into T1 and T2. So that's giving this thermostat now 12 volts of power. So now you've done all that, you're ready for the most difficult part of this job, and that's putting in the Wi-Fi code. Now, once you've set it up for the first time, if it's your first wire plan, you're going to be a bit nervous about have I done it right, is everything going to work, and you're going to want to put your heating on, your hot water on independently. So if you've got this symbol on your Nest, you're going to want to turn it off. It's bacteria prevention for Legionella. So just go over to settings, and it's on equipment, select that, and you'll go down to bacteria prevention and turn that off. That way you can use your app or the thermostat on the wall to select your central heating, select your hot water, make sure the zone valve's operating like it should and the heat's going where it should, and then you're done.